Hello and welcome to tutorial number 4. So at long last, I'm back. Thank you so much for your patience. If you've been following my previous tutorials, it took me like a year between 3 and 4. I've been extremely busy, but I'm trying to find the time to make the rest of them because I want you to see them. So this tutorial, here is what we're going to be making. So this is the scene where there's these sort of swirling gems and rocks swirling around this rock. And this one is probably the one that people ask me about the most of how I did it. And it's actually the easiest one, I think, in my opinion. You guys are going to be so surprised at how easy it is. So you may be wondering, so a lot of people think like, well, how'd you get the particles to swirl that way? It looks almost like cloth. Well, spoiler, it is cloth. So it's basically just two cloth sheets that are swirling around this rock and colliding with it. And then I scattered a bunch of rocks on top of the cloths and just made the cloths invisible. That's it. Very easy, and it rendered really quickly too. So it was one of those surprisingly easy ones to do that just happened to look really cool. So you could do all of this inside Cinema 4D. You could do all of it inside of Houdini, but at the time that I made this, which was like a year ago now, I did the cloth part in Houdini because that's what I was more comfortable with, and I knew it would give me a better result. And then I did the scattering and all the rendering and stuff inside of Cinema 4D. So I'm going to show you that way. That's how I did it. I'll show you, how you can do it all in Cinema and how you can do it all in Houdini as well, briefly. But I want to show you guys how I did it, which was like halfway in Houdini and halfway in Cinema 4D. I think now, like a year later, I'm much more comfortable in Houdini, so I probably would have done the whole thing inside of Houdini. But without further ado, let's dive into Houdini, and I'll show you guys how I did this. So here we are. Let me throw down a geo node. We're going to call this cloth sim and dive in there. So the first thing we need is our rock. Or whatever you're going to collide with. Now you don't have to do a rock. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to show you the principles of how I did this, and you can apply it to whatever you want. But let's put down a file, and I think I found a model of a rock on like Megascans or something, but you could make one. You could use a sphere. You don't have to have it collide with anything. You can do whatever you want. So let's see, working files. Where is it? Come on. Okay, tutorials, rock, there it is. And then of course Houdini brings it in gigantic, so put down a transform, scale it down to 0.01. Okay, it's a little more reasonable. So here's my rock. Cool. We're not going to texture it or anything in here. This is just going to be for collisions. The next thing I want to do is make some cloth. So I'm going to put a template on this for now, and then I'm going to put down a poly patch. I think that's what I want. No. Let's see. We'll put down a planar patch. That's what I want. So there we go. There it is. Basically, it's just a grid, just a little square, but it's broken up into triangles for you, and it allows you to dictate the edge length and make the triangles smaller or bigger. It's really good for cloth. So we want that. We want it to be on the ZX plane like that, and we want it to be much, much bigger. Like a lot bigger. And maybe let's decrease the edge length so that it doesn't get so, just for now, so we can scale this up to the right size. And maybe I'll do, make it non-uniform like that. And that, cool, something like that. Great. So now we have that. Let's throw it into a transform. Hit enter on the keyboard to pull up this little gizmo. Move it over here. That seems right. Okay. So now that we have that, let's set up our Vellum sim here real quick before we do the other piece of cloth. Because basically what I had happen was I had a cloth here, and then I have another cloth right here, and I have them both move towards the rock and then collide with each other and swirl. So that way I have this sort of swirling mass around it. It was easier to do it with two pieces of cloth to get the result that I wanted than 1. So let's go Vellum configure cloth. Okay, and then Vellum solver. Okay, so if we just hit play on the keyboard, it should just fall. Yep, it's working. Great. What we want is we want it to move towards this and collide with it and then swirl around it. So we need to make this as a collider first. So up here in the Vellum sim, the cloth thing, there's on this third little node, when you hover over it, it says collision geometry. I don't know if you can see that down there, but you just plug in your collision geometry and there you go. Now it's a collider. It's easy as that. Okay, so I think there's I'm trying to remember how I did this. It's been like a year since I made it. So I think that I either put an attractor here to attract these, or I gave it some initial velocity. Let's try giving it some initial velocity first and see what that does. So let's use a point velocity, put that in there, and I think that's what you can do, right? Let's just add velocity, and then we want it across, let's see, what plane is this? If you look down here, this is the Z plane, right? Yeah, so I want it across the Z, and it's the positive, so 5, 10. So I want it, let's give it like 5 in the positive and see what that does, if that does anything. Yep, great. So what that's doing is it's just giving it some initial velocity. It's basically throwing it in one direction on the first frame. Okay, cool. We also don't want to have any gravity. So you see how it's just like falling down like that? I don't want that. So in the solver, let's go to forces and gravity. Let's just turn that to 0. And then let's click this little stopwatch here. So that'll make it go in real time. Otherwise it just goes really fast. So great, it's working as expected. It's colliding. Cool, very cool. Okay, let's get our other one set up. So let's go like this. Take this transform and change this to, oops, positive 12. And that should put it over here, right? Okay, and then let's grab this point velocity and make it negative 5. And then let's see, can I merge these? I can't remember if I can just merge these into one cloth or if that will just destroy it. Let's see. Let's move these down. Does that work? Let's see. It does. Great. Okay, so that's what I was doing. So I have two cloths colliding with each other like that. And now I just need to make them swirl. And one thing I may want to do, I'll probably want to make these cloths bigger. So let's go like 3 and 2. Great. Something like that, because I'm going to have the camera up really close, like right here, and I don't really want to see the edges of these. But we can, I'm just kind of showing you the principles of how this is done. I don't need to like totally finesse it to make it perfect. You kind of get the idea. So okay, there's that. Great. Now this cloth is not nearly wrinkly enough for me. You see how it's just sort of, you see how these big broad features. So there's a few things we can do to make it more wrinkly. Number one is give it more segments. So in the planar patch, let's decrease the edge length down to like 0.3. Cool. Let's see if that helps. Yeah, that's great. The other thing we will probably want to do is in the solver itself, or sorry, in the cloth constraint, if we come down, so this, if you're unfamiliar with Houdini, this node right here is basically doing all the settings for the cloth, like how stretchy it is, how bendy it is, how stiff it is, all that. And then this one right here, the solver, is actually just the brain that's calculating how it should move. So if we come here and we go to stretch, we want bend, the bend stiffness. And if we decrease this from this guy all the way down to 1e minus 10, that makes it, the bend stiffness is really, really low. So it should bend a lot more and crinkle up. Yeah, that's better. Cool. Let's play that back. Okay, so it's working as expected. The next thing we want to do is make them swirl around this when it collides. So to do that, we're going to dive inside the Vellum solver. If you double click it, you see these two little things here. One is output force, one is output source. Don't worry about this one here. We're only going to be working the output force. And there's this little thing, this little sticky note here that says wire pop forces into force to apply per point forces. So that's what we're going to do. So you put anything that you want, any like turbulence or wind or other external forces that you want to affect your cloth, you just wire them into this thing here. So let's put a pop axis force. And what that does, it's basically just a spinner. And you can see it kind of gave me this little gizmo thing here. If I increase the radius, this is the area that it's going to affect. And I want to increase the height as well. Just make it like a sphere. So anything that comes within this red sphere is going to spin along an axis that I define. And what axis is that? So here's the axis direction here. And there's a 1 in the y, meaning this white line right here is the axis that it's going to spin around. If I change it to 1 in the x, suddenly that white line is right here. So now it would be rotating like this, which I don't want. I do want it in the y. Oops, no, I want 0. And I can also do a combination of both. So if there's 1 and 1, it'll make it an angle like that. So let's just make it 0 and 1 there. And let's just see what that does. Like, I don't really know what that's going to do yet until I play it. So let's hit it. It's colliding. Okay, you can see it's starting to spin more. That's great. That's what I want. But it's not, it's kind of pulling it away from the rock, and I want it to pull in towards the rock. I want it to like hug against it snugly. Snugly, yeah. So let's see, the speed, what do I want? I want some suction speed. That's what I want. Let's put 1 in the suction speed. So that what that's going to do is it's going to suck it towards the middle as it spins. Because right now it's spinning so quickly that it's throwing it away from the middle. So you want to add a little bit of suction speed. There we go. Look at that. That is what I want. Cool. So that's basically it. Now we can finesse this more. I'm gonna want to make these cloth sheets much bigger, because I can see that there's already gaps. If I had a camera right here, you can already see off the edge. So I'm gonna make them a lot bigger. I may also want to, well, let's see. Let's start by making these bigger. Let's go 5. It's gonna take a second. And let's go 4. And that's probably going to intersect already. So I may need to adjust these transforms. So here, let me make sure I template my rock so I can see. So I'm going to go grab this guy and move him so that he's not intersecting to begin with. So what is that? Negative 22.8155. So let's just change this guy to 22.8155. And that should do it. Okay, great. Let's also increase the resolution of these. So let's take this down to like 0.1. And hopefully my computer doesn't explode. It's calculating. %. Wow. Maybe that's too much. I'm going to cancel it. Hitting escape. Please don't crash. In fact, I should probably save this. First, let's put this to something reasonable, like 0.5 for now. Great. And then I'm going to save it. so that if it does crash, I don't lose all this progress here. Tutorials, tutorial 4. Let's just call this tutorial 04. Okay, so let's make this maybe 0.2 instead of 0.1. Oops, nope, 0.2. That's a little faster. Looks better. Let's get that off of there. Come down to the solver. And let's play. Let's see what that does. So even with all these subdivisions and all this stuff, Vellum is still a very quick cloth solver. And that's why I decided to do all the cloth in Houdini as opposed to Cinema 4D, because Cinema 4D's cloth is just not great. There's now there's like S26, which has the better cloth solver. And that's cool, but at the time of me making the project, that didn't exist. Houdini is still so much better than Cinema 4D's cloth solver, even with all the new stuff. So I would, like, this kind of thing, like, you can get this effect in Cinema 4D, but it's going to be much, much slower. Houdini is so much faster. So it's worth learning Houdini, even if you just dive in and do these simple things here with the Vellum cloth. It's not that scary. So, okay, that's working. That's what I want. Yeah, I think that's going to be good. So, because we're going to be like right here. Cool. Okay, so what I might do is, let me cache this here. So let's put down a Vellum IO, which is basically a file cache for that. And I'm going to cache, let's hit delete channels. I don't need 240 frames of this. Let's just do like, let's do 96. See what that does. Let's hit save to disk. And when you're saving it to the disk, it calculates much, much faster. You can see it's going 7, 8, 9, 10. These are the frames. It goes much faster than when you play it because it doesn't have to display this actually doing anything. So I'll pause the recording here so you don't have to watch this cache. Okay, we're back. So that took like 1 minute and 30 seconds. It wasn't so bad. So now we have this cache. We can hit load from disk, and we can now like scrub through all the way up to frame 96. That's cool. Let's go like this. Let's bring down a merge and put this one here, and let's put our rock there so we can see them both at the same time. Right. Okay, so let's do a flip book so we can see at what speed this is working. Let's just go to 96, hit start. That's another thing I love about Houdini over Cinema 4D is it allows you to quickly cache these little flipbook things and then replay them back at full speed. In Cinema 4D, you're kind of just stuck with the speed that the playhead goes, and it's hard to tell at what speed things are moving sometimes when it's a really heavy render like this. So with this, you watch, I can just hit play and watch it in full speed. It's great. It's like a little mini cache. So I think that's probably a pretty good speed. I'll show you a little trick here if you didn't like the speed. So here we go. We've got the whole thing. That's looking nice. But this is only 4 seconds. I think I might want to stretch it down because you're not going to show this part. You only want to show it where it's like already colliding right here. So from frame 24 to 96, it's like 3 seconds. I want more than that. So what I can do is you can actually retime the cloth after it's been simulated with this retime node. So what I want to do, so let's just go to frame 48. And the retime, if I just set the speed to 0.5, it makes it half as fast. If I set it to 0.1, it makes it 1/10 of the speed. So let's set it to like 0.25. And then let's see what that does. Pretty cool, right? So let's do another flipbook. Actually, let me cancel that. Let's do a flipbook with new settings because it's going to go way beyond 96. Let's go 240, hit start. So this way, I only had to simulate 4 seconds of actual cloth stuff, but now that I've made it a quarter of the speed, it means it's going to be 4 times as long. So I'm actually going to have 16 seconds of animation now based off of a 4-second simulation. So that's pretty cool. So you don't actually have to calculate 16 seconds of cloth simulation, which, you know, for this one, it only took 1.5 minutes. That's fine. But if you have something like really, really heavy, and it's, you know, it could be hours or days even. Sometimes it's easier just to calculate something at full speed for 2 to 4 seconds and then slow it down. Then you have over like 16 seconds. Then you have this like really cool slow motion thing. So look at that. Pretty cool, right? Man, I love Houdini. A year ago when I made this, I wouldn't have said that. I would have said, I hate Houdini. It's super hard. But if you're just learning Houdini, keep at it, guys. It gets better. And it's just, the more I use it, the more I'm like, why do I use Cinema 4D? But then I use Cinema 4D. I'm like, oh, but it's just so friendly and nice and easy to set up my lights. And yeah, I don't know. They're both great for different reasons. So I think that's great. This is looking really cool. Let's call it good. So I think I'm probably going to want to cache this out to an Alembic. So let's find a frame. Let's go to frame 96. Right where it starts to collide, I think is good. Maybe like 120. Yeah, let's say 120 is good. And then 120 to 240. So that gives me a full 5 seconds of twisting. So the way I would do that, I don't want this rock here. So I just want the retime part. I want the cloth. And I want, let's say, let's say ROP Alembic output is what you want. And we're going to call this cloth. Okay, and what I want to do is change this to render frame range and right click and go delete channels, and what did I say? Was it 120 to 240? So 120 to 240, that's what I want. The other thing I want to do is I don't need motion blur because we're not even going to see this cloth. This cloth is just for me to attach a bunch of rocks to. So it doesn't matter if the cloth looks like crap. You just kind of need the general motion. I don't think I need any of this other stuff. So here's where it's going. I want to go hip, and then I want to change it to Alembic to make a folder for the Alembic. And then I want to put $OS / and then $OS. So what that's going to do, $OS means operator string, I think. But basically it's just a little code that tells it to name it whatever you named this. So it's going to go, the file, it's going to go into an Alembic folder and then a cloth folder. And then this thing is going to be called cloth.abc. Just whatever you named this is what's going to go there. So when I have that, I would just hit, oh, actually, one other thing, sorry. If I middle click on this retime, you can see all the attributes that are on here. There's a ton of stuff. Oop. You can also just hit the I right there and it stays permanently. There's a ton of crap on here. It's just data that I don't need. And if I cache this to my Alembic file, it's going to store all that data and make my file bigger for no reason. I don't need any of that crap. All I need is P, this one right here, position. That's all I need. So let's just put down an attribute delete. And if you want, you can just click this drop down box and you could manually select all the ones to delete. But the easier way when you have a ton of them is just to put this star. That means delete everything. And even though position P is in here, you cannot delete position. Even if you tell it to delete it, you can't delete it. So don't worry about it. So just put a star, 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 star. Yeah. And then if we middle click, it's way cleaner. We have some groups here. We don't need those groups. So let's do a group delete. I should just put a star like I just said. Cool. So now we should just have P. That's it, position. Okay, so now when we cache this to disk, it's going to be a much smaller Alembic file, which means it's going to run a lot faster in Cinema 4D. So let's talk about how to scatter things on here in Houdini. So like I said, I did this in Houdini for the cloth, and then at this point I cached it out to disk and I brought it into Cinema 4D and I scattered some stuff on it. And I'll show you that here in a second. It's really easy, but you can also do it in Houdini too. If you're a Houdini user and you don't want to do this in Cinema, you can just go put down a scatter, and let's see. Let's take scatter onto there, and what that does is it scatters a bunch of points all over the surface of your cloth. So I don't want to relax the iterations, and let's put like that many. So now we can kind of see it. So there's points all over my cloth. But you can see the points are sort of jittering everywhere because every frame it's scattering points in a different pattern, and I don't want that. I want them to stay in the same position. So what I need to do in Houdini is do this time shift, and basically what time shift does, if you delete this, it'll just hold on a frame. So right now I'm just holding on frame 1. So even if I go past it, it's just stuck on frame 1. Or I could go to frame 100 and it'll just hold on frame 100 no matter what. So what I want is I want it to hold on frame 1. And then what I want to do is use a point deform, which requires a mesh to deform, a rest point lattice, and a deformed point lattice. So the mesh to deform is my scatter. The rest point lattice is this, I believe, the time shift, because it's resting. And then the deformed point lattice is this. And I think that should work. Let's see. Yep. So now they're moving, but they're not jittering around. Cool. So I can just scrub ahead. So I've got my points. Now what do I do with those points? I want to turn those points into rocks. And let's see, I think I can even visualize this somehow. Let's go lit spheres. Yeah. So now you can kind of see what it's doing with these spheres. Let's go up to here. They're all the same size though. I want them to be random. So what I want to do on this scatter is do an attribute create, and the attribute we want is called p-scale. And right now the p-scale is 0, so they all disappeared. But if I change it to 1, they come back huge. So let's just change it to like 0.1. Okay. And then I want to do, now that I have that attribute, let's go attribute randomize. And by default, it's randomizing color. What I want to randomize is p-scale, which is point scale. And this is a one-dimensional attribute. And I want it to be between 0.001 and 0.1. And maybe I want to change this to an inside or custom ramp. So what I can do is change this one so that my maximum one's going to be 0.1, my lowest one's going to be 0.001, and then this will be 0.005 or something. And then I can move these so I can adjust it so that there's only a small percentage of them are large. Let's go 0.2. So like most of these are going to be let's go 0.01, 0.08. Let's go 0.09, like that. So I can just play around with this and have a different distribution. So that's basically what I did. So that's how you do it in Houdini. So you get your points there, and then instead of having spheres, you would just copy something else to points. So I could do let's go box, and let's put a pig head like that, and let's go copy to points, and then I want the points here, and the things I want to copy. Let's merge these. Put them in there. And then let's make sure we pack an instance. So you can see, well, it's copying both of them. For now, let's just do the pig head. But you can see it's copying pig heads to all those points. And then I could also do another attribute randomize. Let's get rid of this box for now. I'm just going to show you on the pig head. Let's do attribute create. We're going to create an attribute called orient. And it is a 4-dimensional attribute. And let's go attribute randomize. And it's going to randomize color again. We don't want that. We want to randomize orient. And it is a 4-dimensional thing. So now it's all random. They're all jumbled up, right? Cool. So basically just do that with rocks. Okay, so that's it for the Houdini part. Now I'm going to jump into Cinema 4D and show you guys how I really did this using Cinema 4D. So, okay, so here we are in Cinema 4D. I'm using my old file. This is the one that I actually used in the video instead of using my new cache that I built out in Houdini just a second ago. So the way I did it before is I actually cached each of these cloths out separately. So I have a right one and a left one. It doesn't really matter. If you cached it all at the same, it's fine. So here's what's happening. Great. Let me extend this, make it like 240. So cool. There you have it. So let's scatter some stuff on here. And first let's get rid of this work plane that drives me nuts. There we go. So what you want to do is you could just clone things on here. Let's just start with the right, just make it easier. So I could just take a cube and put that inside of a cloner and then set the cloner to object and the object to right. And there we go. Cubes on there. But let's say, I want to make the cube smaller and I want like lots of them. I want like 500. I could change this to multi-instance. Let's go 20,000. It works pretty well, but when you start getting, if you start getting up to like millions of them, it doesn't work all that well. So you could use a matrix object, which is what I did. But let me show you how I do this with the cloner, just so you can kind of visualize it better. So let's use this cube. What I want is effectors. I want to go MoGraph, and I want to go to the random effector, and I want it to affect the rotation. So let's go 360, 360, 360, and just completely randomize the rotation of these. And then the scale, let's do uniform scale, and let's put 1. That makes everything, varies everything up. So let's take this cube actually and just shrink it way down, like that. Just lots and lots of small ones. Okay, and let's turn off the visibility of our cloth by changing the stoplights there. So you can already see what it's doing, but we just need a lot more clones, right? So we need we've got 20,000. Let's try 200,000. Ooh, see, look at that. So you're getting these like wrinkles, but it looks like particles, right? It's pretty cool. Now it's moving super slowly. And we're still just using cubes, right? What if I do like 400,000? It's going to take a while. There we go. Okay, but now it's like I can barely even move around my viewport. So that's why I did it with a matrix object. So if you've watched my previous tutorials, you'll see that I use a matrix object a lot instead of a cloner. A matrix object is basically the same thing as a cloner, but just like way faster. So let me turn this off, and let me turn this back on, and let me grab my rocks from my other scene. So what I did, I think I found some rocks on megascans.com. I just found like a mossy rock, and I made a bunch of them. See, there's all different, it's like a bunch of different rocks. So let me grab all these, copy them, But you can copy whatever you want on there. You don't have to use rocks. Let me just group these now and call them rocks. Get that out of the way. So we're going to delete this cloner, and we're going to use a matrix object instead. So we're going to go to Redshift, Objects, Matrix Scatter. And it works the same way as a cloner. Just set it to object mode. Set your object to be that. And it scatters some cubes on there. Let's put 200,000 of them. It just works way faster though. Look at that. So we've got 200,000 and it's working like almost real time. Let's go 400,000. Still working better, right? So the matrix object is just so much faster than a cloner. That's why I recommend using it. The only downside is that you don't get feedback into what your actual clone looks like. It always scatters cubes on here. But we want to scatter rocks. How do we do that? Well, in the matrix object, on this redshift tag, if we change the particles to custom objects, whatever we drop in here will now become the clones that are cloned on there. So let's drop our rocks in there. Let's grab all of these. Let's come back here and just drag them in. And then make sure we set the distribution to random. Okay. And then let's make sure we put this, so right now these are all facing the same way. We want to use that random effector we set up before. So in the matrix object, go to effectors and just drag in that random effector we made earlier. And there you go. So still, it looks like cubes, right? But let me save this in case it crashes. Let's go tutorial 04. Let's fire up the render viewer. There's no lights in this scene or anything, but I just want to show you for the sake of showing you. It should take a second. It should show up as a bunch of rocks. And go. Well, nothing's showing up at all. That's weird. Maybe I need to set this to redshift. Probably that. And let's drop a light in. Let's just put in a sunlight. Objects, sun and sky rig. That's odd. Maybe it's because I grouped these. Why would it not show up? I have an idea. Let me try this again. Maybe my rocks might just be really, really small and you can't see anything. So let's try boosting the size of these by going into this redshift thing. And on the scale multiplier, let's go 10. No? 20? Is my sky even working? I can't see anything. Okay, well, let's test this. Let's turn off the matrix object. Maybe my render view just isn't working because I can't even see this rock. I'm going to pause the recording and I'm going to figure it out and then I'll tell you the solution. Okay, I figured it out. So everything was working fine. What happened was my rocks were just too gigantic. So they were just covering up the whole scene. So when I set this scale multiplier at 1, the default, all these rocks are so big that it just basically covered up the camera. So what I want to do is scale this down to like 0.02. That's the great thing about the matrix object is if you get everything working the way you want it, you can just scale down all of them at the same time globally. And I also turned off my random effector. So, okay, that's one. Now let's scatter like, let's go 400,000 on there. I have way too many of these like crystal ones. I want to get rid of that. So these already had the textures on them from when I imported them from the last scene, but there. That's basically it. So basically I just have all these rocks, and you could put whatever you want in there. You could put pig heads, you could put little action figures, spaceships, spheres, whatever you want. I just basically used the texture that came with it from Megascans and scattered a bunch of them on there. Now let's do the same for the other side. Let me group these again just to get them out of the way. Let's turn on the left side. And let's just duplicate this matrix and set it to be left. Come on. Matrix left. And then let's turn off the visibility of that. My cloth already had a rock texture on it, that's why it looks like that. But I turn it off, so cool, there you go. And then I just position the camera, get in real close, something like that. And that's what that looks like. And then I just, you know, played around with the lighting, just take the sun down to like get it somewhere where it casts more shadows so you can really see these wrinkles like that. Maybe spin it a little bit. So these are just black rocks right here, but you can, I added in some that were like gold, some that were like a crystal color. And that's basically it. That's how I did the effect. It's pretty simple. You make the cloth and then you just scatter things on it and it sticks to it. It's pretty cool, right? So people think you made this like amazing particle simulation that like, how did you get it to fold? And it's like, well, it's just cloth with a bunch of stuff stuck to it. So that's it. I hope it helps. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll try and answer those for you. And then I will hopefully not take so long to make the next tutorial. Thanks.